shot, redirected, score! Game 7, Montez St. Louis! We are going back to Tampa Bay! A Cavalier spinning, a Cavalier looking, trying to drop it off, brings it in himself, left it in the middle, shot, score!
What's going on, everyone? I hope everybody's staying safe. This is your host, Philip Wunderlich, and your co-host, Jake Ricker, as well as your other co-host, Michael Wax. Mike, how are you doing? We'll start with you, buddy.
Doing well. Florida is currently in the middle of one of their classic thunderstorm seasons. I wish they could combat that by playing playoff hockey right now, but alas, this is the situation that we're in, and we'll eventually get into the playoff talk later. But overall, doing well.
Jake?
I'm doing good, Phil. Hanging in there. Good. I'm excited that we're getting closer and closer to hockey season, but I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing really good, thank you. So the first things first is that we did talk about, if you guys mentioned playoffs are being talked about, thought to believe to be a 24 teams format with 12 East and 12 West, with 6 in each division. And basically the Ready to Play committee is all but confirming this, and it's expected to be starting in July. And with the current bracket, our Bolts would be getting a first-round bye. And apparently the closure between Canada and USA won't affect the comeback date. Jake, what do you have to say about this?
I'm very conflicted about this, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but I don't know how to feel about this playoff format yet because there's a lot of pros and cons to this. There is no perfect playoff scenario in which everybody will be happy, but I don't know. I'm conflicted. I think it could be a lot of fun. I think this could be a format the NHL could potentially use years down the road, but it's I don't know. It's going to be tough because, when you get teams that get in the playoffs like Montreal and Chicago, teams that would normally not have any shot, they're mathematically still in it as of right now in the way the season paused. But it's extremely unlikely that they would make it. So, for those teams to advance, I know Pittsburgh fans would be through the roof if Montreal goes and eliminates them, no matter how far they go. So, people have talked about whether or not there'll be you can't see them, but I'm quoting an asterisk next to this year's Stanley Cup winner. And honestly, I think there kind of will be. I don't think there'll be a full asterisk, like some other teams have Houston Astros. But, I think there's kind of like a little half asterisk, even though everybody's going through the same thing and dealing with the same scenarios. It's just weird. And with some of the proposed changes, which we'll get into later, I almost worry it's going to change the game too much and just won't be a regular playoff series no matter what you do.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The benefit of having that is that the bigger markets, like we mentioned, Chicago and Montreal, would be involved in it. So, everybody's struggling financially, and that would help out a lot. The NHL, the lower leagues have already had to cancel the AHL and WHL, which is a women's league, because they don't have TV revenue. So that would be huge on that financial perspective. But like you said, too, it would be kind of hard because if someone that's a lower team beats a higher team and they shouldn't be in there, then, like you said, it's going to be somewhat of an asterisk there. Mike?
I can't help but agree with you guys in saying that this is going to be really strange. However, I do think that's going to be really interesting, and that it's going to be something that captivates a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
You were talking about, Jake and Phil, both of you mentioned that the TV revenue is probably going to be through the roof because, nobody can go to the games. So you look at some of even the first round matchup in this 24 proposed team bracket, and they are significant moneymakers. I don't know if we're going to talk about that now or we'll save it for later, but a lot of these first round matchups are just fantastic for the NHL regarding either the fact that they are a big city or the fact that their hockey market is so passionate. So I am more towards the side of optimism when it comes to this. I do think it's going to be very strange, but I want my playoff hockey back. So I am just hoping for the best, honestly.
Yeah, you make a good point, and I agree with you. I think that everybody's excited. I think no matter what they end up doing, no matter how many fans it ultimately does upset, everybody's still going to be excited because we haven't had playoff hockey. We haven't had hockey for so long that no matter what they do, people are definitely going to be excited. And some of these first round matchups are fantastic. I mean, and even the potential technically second round matchups are a lot of fun. So, I think that, like, even Calgary, Winnipeg, that's a fun one. Even Montreal, Pittsburgh. I mean, they're all really, really good matchups. We could potentially have a Bolts versus Panthers, best team in Florida matchup. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with this playoff format that looks like it's going to be the format. The only thing, too, to me, I know a lot of people have called this first set of games the first round, and then we would technically have a first round bye. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but to me, because people are saying, like, well, this is not like the normal Stanley Cup playoffs. Well, technically it is. It's the same, at the end of the day, the same, 16 teams are going to be playing for the Stanley Cup. To me, this first round is just the play-in games. I don't know if they're going to call the first round the Stanley Cup playoffs or how they're going to, do that. But, I know it looks like we have a first round bye, but I think technically, I mean, this is still a regular playoff format. The way we're just deciding the bottom 8 seed or bottom 4 seeds for each conference is different.
Yeah, and other teams have done this wild card setup. I mean, you look at baseball, for instance, and it's basically the same way that they have it. So I don't think it's that bad of playoff format. And they've talked about going back to a different playoff format anyways. So, I mean, it's a good trial run, especially in the circumstances. And like you guys said, I just want hockey back. I don't really care on how it's going to be played out.
I think another thing that we could see, too, is the realignment again. And I know we just went into realigning divisions and conferences and all that crap, but we could possibly see the realignment of a 1-8 playoffs if this is what we think it's going to be, which is people having the opportunity to see a 1 versus 8 matchup, which is Boston versus Toronto, a 2 versus 7, which would be Tampa versus New York, 3 versus 6, which would be Washington and Carolina, and then 4 versus 5, which would be a battle of Pennsylvania. So if we got to see those things, and granted, I don't think all of the top seeds are going to win, but maybe that presses the NHL into realigning the playoff seeds as a 1-8 rather than the top 3 of each division getting in and then 2 wild cards and possibly a really good team not even making the playoffs, even though they're statistically better points-wise than maybe 2 other teams.
Right. I think you're 100% right on that. I mean, heck, I would totally, in a regular scenario here without the pause, if they changed it to where they just took this 12 teams, this playoff format, if they took just the top 12 teams from the conference and seeded them just like this, and we actually did have teams who can earn a first round bye, I'm totally okay with this. I think on a regular season, this playoff format is a lot of fun. And like you talked about, there's a lot of fun matchups, different matchups. So we're not seeing the same ones every year. We constantly get Capitals, Penguins in the first round normally. That's going to change this year in Toronto. So, I think I would be okay with this 1-12, just looking at the conference and just eliminate the divisions, basically. Not actually, but you know what I mean. I think this would be fun. So, we'll see how it goes. But
well, like you said about getting rid of division, I mean, if you don't have divisions, it's just complete anarchy. So you have an order. But you're right.
My point was you don't look at the top 3 from the division and say, okay, these top 3 automatically get in. Because basically the way they took these standings is they just took the top 12 from each conference at the pause. That's what they did. And then seeded them accordingly. So we have Boston 1, Tampa 2, Washington 3, Philly 4, and then it's 8-9, 5-12, 7-10, 6-11, which isn't bad. I don't know. I like this though. I do.
Right.
Another thing that we could see, just jumping back and forth between hypotheticals and what the actual bracket looks to be shaping up to be, is the top four teams through Boston, Tampa Bay, Washington, and Philly playing tune-up games against each other. This has been reported by a couple of people. I believe the highest person in terms of credibility was either Elliot Freeman or Bob McKenzie. Reported that if these playoff series do happen between the 5 through 12 seeds of each conference, you'll see the 1 through 4 seeds of each conference playing tune-up, getting their feet under them, maybe getting a preview of later in the bracket, which is interesting because if, let's say, Boston faces Philly in these tune-up games and both of them get by the winners and face each other in the technically second, third round, maybe Philly has scouted Boston a little bit better and they're going to put in a better effort. And maybe Tampa has faced and conquered Washington before and they'll find a way to do it again. Or maybe Dallas has found a way to actually win Game 7 in overtime against St. Louis. It's tough to picture, but I think that it is a realistic opportunity for these teams that they'll be able to scout their future opponents.
Yeah, I think you're right. I like that they're doing the exhibition games. I think the NHL looks at it as we don't want these teams to play their play-in series, which I believe is 5 games, and then they come into play in this quote-unquote second round, and those other teams just aren't ready because they've been on such a long pause, even longer pause. So I think they're trying to eliminate some of the rust factor, which I like. I did see some people mentioning that they would like it if the top 4 teams were playing for seeding. So then it did mean something. I don't know. I think that would actually take too long. I don't know if that would actually work. But for what we're talking about, I think you're right. It could make some potentially later matchups more interesting. And I like it too because I think it eliminates the rust factor. So we don't have a rusty Lightning team, having to face a more ready Panthers team that could ultimately potentially screw us.
Yeah.
Especially for guys like Stamkos who haven't played in forever.
Yeah. And the biggest change, though, they said that NHL is going to have social distancing. They're going to be playing with a face shield. No fighting is going to be involved. And apparently coaches and players are going to social distance. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but you're going to see something different. What do you guys think about the changes? I'll start with you, Jake.
This is my biggest concern, and the reason why I'm conflicted about these playoffs is that because, like, for fighting, for example, even though we don't see as much fighting anymore than we did, years ago, it's still a major part of the game. So taking that out, I think is going to change the game a lot. And that's why I mentioned, even though everybody's going through the same thing and, everybody's got a fair shot, blah, blah, blah. This is why I feel like there's like that quote unquote half asterisk there, because it completely changes the game and it worries me a little bit. It could be fine. I could be wrong. And, we may not notice it at all since like I said, there's not a ton of fighting as it is, but this is something that worries me. I don't know how that's going to play out because we haven't seen something like this before, but, I wonder, is the physicality going to be technically turned down a notch because players know they can't go and, knock a guy off his skates if they want, not in hitting, but, in a physical fight.
Yeah. And then that's what kind of worries me too. Like you mentioned about the physicality. Hockey's a physical sport. We all know that. That's why we love and watch it. And so if you turn that down, that might be really detrimental to the sport. It might not be as fun to watch, but we'll see what happens. Mike?
So when I look at the new rules that are in place, I'm really bummed out about the probably lack of physicality, as is, I'm sure, every other hockey fan. But I guess it's just the optimist in me that is looking at this and saying these might be the most skilled playoffs in history. We might be seeing things that we've never seen before. We talked about weeks ago, we've mentioned this a couple times, the fact that this is going to be the most competitive playoffs probably ever because people like Stamkos are back. And they wouldn't have been back until later in the playoffs. And some people might not have even been back in the playoffs at all, like Dougie Hamilton, who suffered a broken leg, thought was out for the season. Maybe he's in the playoffs if he makes a quick enough recovery. But I do think that the skill of these guys, even though the first round might be a little wonky in terms of them getting back into playing style and playing shape, I think it's going to be through the roof. And I hope it's through the roof. These guys have been waiting to play for a couple of months. Playoff hockey is always cranked up in terms of intensity, whether or not that's physical or just the way that we perceive plays and certain dangles and saves and all that good stuff. And I'm very optimistic, again, for seeing what might be in terms of skill. But also I understand that people are upset that there's not that much physicality.
Yeah. So my question to you is it going to become something like the All-Star game where there's not a lot of hitting? Obviously, there's no fighting. I mean, it's purely based on skill. Is that something you might see?
I'm going to have to disagree because as someone that was fortunate enough to go to the All-Star game in 2018, the players don't really care in the All-Star game. But I guess along those lines, sure, like you could see something where, hey, the players are still going to care. The players are still going to lay a little bit of physicality. But at the end of the day, they're really going to try and actually make saves, score goals, get their team to win. Whereas in the All-Star game, they don't really care who wins. Like, it's nice that they get a bonus. It's nice that the winning team's MVP gets some sort of car. But at the end of the day, a Stanley Cup is way more valuable than a car.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the big thing there. I mean, I think these are all valid concerns, and I want people to understand too that, we're being overly critical because as diehard hockey fans, you want your sport to succeed as much as possible. So these are the things you think about, and these are the things that could potentially concern you. We're not saying that this is what's going to be the case, but I do think because this is the Stanley Cup, I definitely think we will still see plenty of skill and probably even still some physicality to it. But it is something you think about. And another thing too, fan energy. There's not going to be, I'm assuming, any fans in the stadiums, or I don't know if they maybe will try to do a limited amount. I doubt it, but there's not going to be any fan energy for players to feed off of, which some do. So that makes you wonder too, is that going to be turned down? But I think, like you mentioned, Michael, that the Stanley Cup alone is going to boost these guys tremendously. I think these will be very fun playoffs. I think it'll be weird. There'll be a couple issues, but overall, I think this is going to work out. I think it'll be okay. We'll get past the whole asterisk thing, half asterisk thing. And I think this could potentially be, huge for the future of the sport. So.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that sucks to me is that nobody's going to be booing Gary Bettman over there when he presents the Stanley Cup.
Hey, maybe they do something similar to what they did with Goodell, and they raise money for charity and they pipe in booze.
That's another thing too. I wonder, would they consider putting, I've seen some leagues put in fans, that's kind of crazy, but like pumping in audio or sound. Like I wonder if that's something they'll do. I know obviously some of the things I've seen people say is that obviously this is very early stage. There's still a lot of details to be ironed out. But I wonder if that's something they would potentially consider doing. And I want to mention this too real quick before we move on from the playoff format. John Cooper was on NHL Network. I mean, he talked about how, I forget who the person was, but someone said, you're not going to be able to find a playoff scenario that pleases everybody. But at the end of the day, do you want that chance to play for a Stanley Cup? And he's like, absolutely. So to your earlier point, Michael, these guys are looking to play for the Cup. You're not going to be able to please everyone, but as long as they get that opportunity, they're going to be excited and ready to go.
Yeah, and that's big. Another thing I want to mention too, we had a kind of a sporting event poll, and a lot of people said that they would want to come back and watch it right now. They don't really care about, anything else. They just want to be able to go to the games. So, that's kind of important too.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, like we mentioned before, it's been a long time since we've had hockey, so they're itching to get back as we're slowly starting to get done with this quarantine and reopen and get life back to normal as much as we can. People want their sports back and they're ready to go and they're willing to go. Obviously, we still want to be careful and concerned, but and that I think that speaks to how much important sports are for a lot of people, especially because this is something that a lot of people feed off of. This is their escape from reality. They are very excited, and when they know they have a chance to go back, they wouldn't think twice about it.
I'm talking about polls. I know you guys have been posting out those polls, but I'm really surprised that Dan Boyle lost to Eric Cernak.
Yeah, we are too.
It's been a lot of fun. I can't wait for the next round. What do we have coming up next? We have centers, right? Centers coming up. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
They've been a lot of fun. Yeah, there's definitely been some surprises in there. I was waiting for when one of the older guys was going to win one of these, and we finally had that happen with Mr. Dave Andrewchuk winning the left wing category. But I think it kind of speaks to either just our following is maybe a little bit younger, but recency bias. People just remember those names a little bit better, so that's why. But hey, it could also show us too, Cernak could be a fan favorite in the next couple of years here because he's obviously got some supporters already.
It looks like he already does, like you say, and he looks like he already is a fan favorite. But Dan Boyle was always one of my favorite defensemen, so I was really shocked by it.
It was a close one too, though, right, Michael? If I remember correctly, it wasn't a blowout by any means like some of the other ones have been. I think it was pretty close.
Yeah, so I have it up here. Dan Boyle beat Stroman in the semifinals by 3%. Eric Cernak beat Pablo Kubina, which was another major upset, by 2%. And then in the finals, Cernak beat Boyle by 3%.
3%. There you go.
So, yes, I remember Faye, one of our followers, calling us out. She's like, "You all are young." And I was like, yeah, pretty much. Like, not only are the people making this young, but a lot of our followers are young too. So,
yeah, like you said, it proves that our audience is a lot younger. I'm glad Dave Andrewchuk finally won. I mean, like someone mentioned before, Andrew Palat might be some trade bait. So if Dave Andrewchuk him, I'd be kind of
well, I like Palat. Palat is one of my favorites. I think he's very underrated. I wrote an article a long time ago. I don't know if you remember, Phil, back when I was writing. I'm not just doing the podcast. I wrote an article about underrated Lightning players, and Palat was one of the top ones on my list. He's one of my favorites, so I do enjoy him. But Dave Andrewchuk is one of the best of the best. One of my favorite Bolts. He's half the reason why I wear number 60 on all my jerseys. So I am happy to see him win. I do think we're going to see some more older guys win. Like when we get into the Martys, the Brad Richards, those guys are going to have some big pull being on that 04 team too. Vinny too. We haven't got to Vinny yet.
Yeah, center is going to be a big one. You have Steven Stamkos and, like you said, Vinny Cavalier, who's huge in the 04 run. Sucks the way his career ended, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about fan favorite. So I think that was going to be really interesting.
Well, some first-round matchups that people listening can be excited for. Brian Bradley versus Vladimir Mesnikov as a 6 versus 11. Chris Gratton versus Valtteri Filppula. Chris Gratton, by the way, is one of the people that I think is the most underrated in Lightning history. Brad Richards versus Anthony Cirelli. So this is where we're going to see.
That's a good one.
If people are recency biased or not. I think so. And 7 versus 10, Braden Point versus Yanni Gord.
Ooh. I know my sister, who my sister's going to be voting for. That'll be another good one, though. I bet you Point wins that one.
Probably.
2 cents.
But please vote in our center one. It'll be up soon enough.
Yeah. And one thing, too, that I might add is the Lightning signed Dmitry Semikin to a 3-year ELC. He's a 20-year-old left-hand defenseman. He played for SKA Nava St. Petersburg, which is the KHL's AHL squad. And he also played for the 1946 St. Petersburg in the MHL, which is kind of like the junior league. And he recorded 24 points in 44 games, 9 goals, 15 assists, and his contract begins next year. What do you guys think about this signing?
I like it. I mean, these are entry level contracts, so these aren't any crazy signings. I'm not going to sit here and rip an entry level contract because it doesn't have a huge effect on our cap hit. I think as for our defensive core, I think we could start to reload the back end of that. We have a couple players that could potentially pop up here. But I don't have any problems with this signing is basically what I'm trying to say, because it's an entry level contract. I don't know too much about this guy, but we'll see how he turns out.
Yeah, just for clarification, he was listed as a right-handed defenseman, but as you said, Phil, he is left-handed. He does play on the left-hand side, which for the Lightning is kind of unfortunate, because if he was a right-handed defenseman, he would be automatically one of the top 5 prospects because they're so rare to find. But if you've seen Semikin's highlight reel, and I know highlight reel isn't the only thing that matters, it's amazing. This man is so agile when it comes to moving the puck. He looks like he has great hands and even better feet, even better skating ability. I'm very excited to see what Semikin can do for the crunch, and possibly one day, and this is optimistic, but again, he's only, I believe, 20. I want to see what he can do for the Lightning one day.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, like I said, the biggest contract coming up next year for us is going to be Sergachev, and maybe someone like that has to come in next year because we're going to be so tight on cap. So it's going to be really interesting to find out next season. And speaking of next season, the contracts, they will not end until the end of the season, which I mean is like usually it's July 1st and it's done and over with, but now it's going to be at the season's end, so then they can re-up contracts and stuff like that.
Was that made official yet? Do we know?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
I think that's a really, really important key that a lot of people aren't really looking at, is not just the players, but having to do with the team staff. Because, and I didn't know this when this announcement was made, but it looks like the team staff contracts also kick in on July 1st and run for that entire year. So they have, and by they I mean the playoff teams, have more leeway in using some of their expiring contracted staff to help them win a Stanley Cup, and then when they win that Stanley Cup, they can hopefully coax them into better contracts for a renewal. So I think that is not only the case for team staff, but for players, even for the executives and the scouts and all that jazz. But I think that it's very good for the teams involved that the contracts aren't expiring on July 1st and that they're just going to expire whenever the deadline is set, because it's not going to be right after the Stanley Cup is awarded.
Yeah, this is definitely the right decision to do, and something that they should absolutely do, depending on how this all plays out. Because, sometimes you have contracts that are either moved, kept, or given a higher raise based on how they perform in the playoffs. So obviously, with everything moving back, you got to move, everything back. So that includes this. This is nice to see, though, because like the points you mentioned, Michael, it helps out some of these playoff teams that could potentially be making it deeper into the playoffs.
Yeah, not only did it help the teams, but it also helps the players. Like Mike said too, I mean, that you could say, oh, I just want a Stanley Cup for you guys. So maybe players like Alex Pietrangelo, who knows, maybe the Blues win again. He can say, I just want 2 cups for you guys. You know, you got to pay me a little bit more money than what you're paying me right now. So it's going to be big on both fronts. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Nope, not for me.
Just a quick little thing. Today, the Lightning announced one of their programs for the off season, or at least off season, maybe not the right word, but their haltage in play, and they're looking at a stick to kindness community effort in fostering their positivity and their love. And I just want to say big thank you to just a really solid class organization. And I know that we have a little bit of blue tinted glasses because we're Lightning fans, but they've really done a lot to make us forget about the things that are going on, whether it's the programs that they've raised or it's Doc Talk with Killer, which has allowed us to see some people around and experience what it's like to ride on a jet ski, I guess. But, you know, big ups to them. Even their all-in challenge, which has raised over $19,000 so far, which gives someone who wins the auction an opportunity to eventually, when everything is all said and done, be on a roster with the Lightning, which is a very cool opportunity. So, you know, again, not being biased or anything like that, but I think the Lightning have done some fantastic things to help us get through these times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I want to talk about that all-in thing real quick. That thing's pretty cool. I mean, I know you guys probably know that they used to do that in football. They used to have like open tryouts and stuff, and that's basically what this is. I mean, could you guys imagine being a member of the Lightning?
No, it's a really cool opportunity they give out. Then you get to do I think you do a press conference, you're signing official contracts, you get gear. It's really cool. I know when I first saw it, I'm like, ooh, I'm interested in this. What's this? And then I realized that the bidding's at, what did you say? Now it's at what, 19,000, which is
Yeah.
an insane amount of money. I'm not quite sure
Oh, no,
who's
no,
paying
sorry.
19,000.
$27,000.
Oh, we're up to 27 now. Okay. So despite it being for only people who have a ton of money, which I don't really know who's doing that, it is very cool. I think it'd be cool too if they could somehow maybe do this down the road for a different kind of charity, maybe, but make it to where you're not actually trying out for the team, but you still get to hang out with a team like this and just do like a raffle kind of thing. Like, you buy a ticket for like, I don't know, $10 or something like that, $100, whatever. It's a very cool thing, but it is crazy how high the price is. And I'm curious to see how high it's going to get.
It is a good charity too, like you mentioned, because I mean that does help the frontline workers, like the police officers and stuff like that, that are basically forced to work, even though this stuff's going on right now. So that's a really good charity. And you were gonna say something, Mike?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that, even though this is only being bid on by people that have a little bit more money, but if you look at the charities involved, it's like Meals on Wheels, Feeding America, No Kid Hungry. Basically, a lot of these places and these organizations that are trying to help people that don't have the needs to get food on a daily basis. And these programs are helping now, but they can only do so much. So with this new donation, the donation page has refreshed and it is now $35,000. So, but as I was saying, it was a lot of good organizations that will help people find their next meal, people that are less fortunate.
Right.
Fair enough.
And,
That's very true.
and I don't want to be priding ourselves or anything like that, but we do give out. Last year we gave out to the Callahan Foundation, and I still give money to them. And this year we're giving money to the Humane Society in Tampa Bay. So we give money to charity as well here at Bay Bolts. But I think that's going to be it for this episode, guys. I hope you all enjoyed, and feel free to ask us questions. It really helps out the show.